Pointing. Pointing is one of the most forceful and direct gestures in body language, often associated with aggression, dominance, or command. When someone points, whether with a finger, a hand, or an object, they are directing attention with precision, but also asserting control. This gesture leaves little room for ambiguity. It communicates a clear message: look here, go there, you're responsible, or this matters, often with an emotional edge. At its core, pointing breaks a basic social norm, invading psychological space. It singles someone or something out, often placing pressure or blame. That's why pointing at a person, especially with a stiff, jabbing motion, is widely perceived as hostile or accusatory. It can feel like a nonverbal confrontation, an unspoken challenge or demand for accountability. In emotionally charged situations, this gesture can escalate tension rapidly, signaling frustration, anger, or an assertion of authority. In professional or leadership contexts, pointing may also take on the role of command or instruction. A teacher pointing at the board, a coach directing players on the field, or a manager delegating tasks may all use this gesture to assert clarity and leadership. When used calmly and precisely, especially when accompanied by clear verbal guidance, pointing can be effective and appropriate. However, when it's sharp, excessive, or aimed at people rather than objects, it often crosses the line into intimidation or control. Culturally, the gesture is fraught with sensitivity. In many societies, especially in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, pointing directly at someone is considered disrespectful or rude. Even in Western cultures where it's more common, there's a social understanding that it should be used sparingly and tactfully, particularly in personal interactions. There's also a psychological layer to consider. People often point when their emotions are heightened, when they feel the need to emphasize, assert, or defend. It's an instinctive gesture that bypasses filters, making it one of the clearest indicators of a person's internal state. In conflict situations, a pointed finger can say more than a full sentence. In summary, pointing is a powerful, directive gesture that often signals aggression, assertion, or command. It can be a useful tool for emphasis or instruction when used carefully, but when aimed at others or used forcefully, it frequently conveys hostility or dominance. As with all body language, its true meaning depends on context, tone, and accompanying cues, but it should always be handled with awareness and intention. Hands behind back. Placing the hands behind the back is a distinct and often misunderstood gesture in body language, typically associated with control, authority, or concealed emotion. When someone stands or walks with their hands clasped behind them, they are sending a message that is both restrained and deliberate, an intentional removal of the hands from view that speaks volumes without saying a word. At its most confident, this posture signals self-control and composure. It is a gesture often seen in military personnel, public figures, and individuals in leadership roles. By keeping the hands out of sight, the person is demonstrating that they are not a threat, that they feel secure enough to disarm themselves. It suggests a calm, measured demeanor and a lack of nervous fidgeting, qualities often associated with confidence and authority. But the gesture also carries a more complex emotional undertone. When someone hides their hands behind their back, they may be masking what they're truly feeling. Hands are expressive instruments, capable of revealing anxiety, frustration, or excitement through movement and gesture. By concealing them, a person may be attempting to suppress or control those emotional leaks. In this sense, the posture can also indicate emotional restraint or guardedness. In situations of confrontation or tension, hands behind the back may reflect suppressed aggression or irritation. The person might be holding themselves back, literally and figuratively, choosing not to react impulsively. While the face might remain neutral, the hidden hands can become clenched or tense, betraying an internal struggle to remain composed. It's a physical manifestation of the phrase, keeping it together. Conversely, in more passive or formal settings, this gesture might suggest detachment or reserved observation. The person isn't necessarily anxious or angry, but they are choosing to remain in a controlled, observational role rather than engaging directly or emotionally. In summary, the hands behind back posture is a body language signal rich with meaning. It often conveys control, restraint, or emotional discipline, but it can also hint at concealed tension or unease, depending on the broader context. Whether used to project calm authority or to manage internal emotion, this subtle gesture communicates volumes about a person's mindset and intent. Crossed arms. Crossed arms are one of the most recognizable and widely interpreted gestures in body language, often signaling defensiveness, resistance, or emotional withdrawal. When someone folds their arms across their chest, it creates a physical barrier between themselves and the outside world, a subconscious attempt to protect the body's core and vital organs. Psychologically, this self-protective posture mirrors an inner desire to shield oneself emotionally, mentally, or socially. This gesture frequently appears in situations where a person feels threatened, judged, or uncomfortable. Whether in a debate, a tense meeting, or a conversation that feels invasive, crossed arms communicate a lack of openness. It's a classic sign that someone is not fully receptive to what is being said, or that they are mentally closing off. This resistance might stem from disagreement, skepticism, or simply discomfort with the topic or the person they are engaging with. Importantly, crossed arms can also indicate insecurity or vulnerability. In unfamiliar environments or social settings, people often cross their arms as a way to feel safer or more in control. It becomes a kind of self-hug, offering a sense of comfort in situations that feel unpredictable or emotionally exposed. In the context of power dynamics, the gesture can take on slightly different shades. When combined with a stiff posture, narrowed eyes, or pursed lips, crossed arms may signify not just defensiveness but active resistance or silent opposition. It can be a person's nonverbal way of saying, "I don't agree," or "I'm not giving in," without speaking a word. However, it's important not to jump to conclusions. Sometimes crossed arms are simply a matter of habit, physical comfort, or even room temperature. A cold environment or lack of armrests might lead someone to cross their arms without any emotional subtext. That's why reading this cue accurately depends heavily on context and accompanying signals, like facial expressions, tone of voice, and posture. In summary, crossed arms are a defensive body language cue that often reflects emotional guarding, resistance to engagement, or discomfort. While not always negative, this posture typically marks a boundary, indicating that the person is not fully open, whether due to disagreement, insecurity, or the need for psychological distance. Recognizing and responding to this cue with empathy can often help diffuse tension and create space for more open dialogue. Crossed legs pointed away. When someone sits with their legs crossed and the top leg or knee is pointed away from another person, it can be a subtle but telling sign of discomfort, disinterest, or emotional detachment. This form of body language often reveals more than facial expressions or spoken words because it taps into the body's instinct to physically orient itself toward what it finds engaging, safe, or attractive, and away from what it finds uncomfortable, threatening, or dull. Human beings are naturally inclined to point their bodies, especially their feet and legs, toward what holds their attention or affection. So, when someone crosses their legs but the upper leg or knee angles away from the person they're speaking with, it often means that their body is retreating, even if their words are polite or their facial expression appears neutral. This gesture is especially common in tense or socially awkward situations. If someone feels judged, unwelcome, or bored, their crossed legs may shift to face away from the source of that discomfort. Unlike more overt gestures like turning the torso or leaning back, this posture offers a socially acceptable, passive way to create distance without breaking conversation entirely. In romantic or interpersonal settings, crossed legs pointed away may indicate a lack of interest or emotional unavailability. In professional contexts, it can reflect a subtle barrier, an unconscious method of self-protection, especially when someone feels out of sync with the group or the topic. It's not necessarily a hostile sign, but it does suggest a withdrawal from full engagement. It's also important to note the difference between crossed legs that point toward versus away from someone. When legs are crossed and oriented toward another person, it often signals openness, comfort, or attraction. But when the legs pivot away, even slightly, it typically reflects the opposite, a guarded, disengaged, or cautious mindset. Of course, context matters. Room layout, chair positioning, or physical habits may influence posture. But when this gesture appears alongside other signs of withdrawal, like minimal eye contact, flat tone, or lack of facial expression, it strongly suggests the person is not fully comfortable, connected, or interested in the current interaction. In summary, crossed legs pointed away from someone are a nonverbal cue that often signals discomfort, disinterest, or emotional distance. It reflects a body that's subtly turning away, even when the conversation remains active. Recognizing this gesture can offer valuable insight into how someone truly feels beneath the surface of polite interaction. Mirroring for connection. Mirroring is one of the most subtle yet powerful body language techniques for building rapport and deepening connection. It involves unconsciously or deliberately mimicking another person's gestures, posture, facial expressions, tone, or even speech patterns. When done naturally and with genuine intent, mirroring creates a sense of familiarity and alignment that helps two people feel more in sync, psychologically and emotionally. At the heart of mirroring is a simple principle: people tend to like those who are like them. When someone sees their own body language reflected back, it generates a sense of comfort and validation. This is not because they consciously notice the mimicry, but because the interaction feels more fluid and affirming. The brain interprets this subtle similarity as a signal of empathy and shared understanding, fostering a feeling of trust. For example, if a person leans forward while speaking, lightly mirroring that posture, after a short pause, can signal interest and attentiveness. If they use hand gestures while explaining a point, gently adopting a similar rhythm can reinforce mutual engagement. Even matching their speaking pace or energy level can help make the interaction feel more harmonious. Importantly, effective mirroring is not about imitation or manipulation, it's about attunement. It must be subtle, respectful, and adaptive to the flow of the interaction. This technique is often used instinctively in close relationships or friendships, where people naturally begin to mirror each other over time. However, it can also be consciously employed in professional or unfamiliar social settings to accelerate the sense of connection. Salespeople, negotiators, therapists, and public speakers frequently use mirroring to build trust, reduce resistance, and create a collaborative dynamic. When misused or exaggerated, however, mirroring can backfire. If someone senses they're being copied too precisely or too quickly, it can come off as inauthentic or even mocking. The key lies in observation and pacing. Mirroring should always feel organic, not strategic. Ultimately, mirroring works not because it tricks the mind, but because it reflects something deeper: empathy. It's a nonverbal way of saying, "I see you, I'm with you, and I'm tuned into what you're expressing." When used sincerely, it turns everyday interactions into meaningful connections. Chin lifted up. A lifted chin is a potent and highly visible form of nonverbal communication, often signaling confidence, assertiveness, or, depending on context and accompanying cues, arrogance. This upward tilt of the head and chin exposes the neck and elevates the gaze, sending a silent but clear message about the person's internal state. It's a gesture that can command attention, project authority, or create social distance, all without a single word. When someone lifts their chin in a social setting, it often communicates a sense of self-assurance. The posture elongates the neck and straightens the spine, giving the impression of presence and poise. This can be especially evident during public speaking, leadership roles, or competitive situations, where the individual's body language is meant to establish credibility and dominance. In these cases, the chin-up stance says, "I belong here," or "I'm in control." It's a classic power pose, used both consciously and unconsciously to assert confidence and establish personal space. However, there is a fine psychological line between confidence and arrogance, and the chin lift is one of the gestures where that line can become blurry. When the chin is raised too high or held there too long, especially when paired with a downward glance toward others, narrowed eyes, or a closed-off body posture, it can quickly be interpreted as smugness or superiority. The lifted chin becomes less about self-assurance and more about condescension. It creates a visual hierarchy, as if the person is literally and figuratively looking down on those around them. This gesture also has roots in evolutionary and animal behavior. Many dominant animals lift their heads and puff out their chests to appear larger and more imposing, while submissive animals lower their heads to show deference. Humans, in much the same way, use the lifted chin to claim status or signal resilience. It often appears during confrontation or challenge, where the gesture acts as a way of saying, "I'm not backing down," or "I'm above this." In subtle social contexts, a slight chin lift can also serve as a silent greeting or acknowledgement, particularly in male-to-male interactions, where it's used to signal familiarity or mutual respect without excessive emotional display. In this case, the gesture is confident but not overbearing. Context and accompanying signals matter greatly. A confident chin lift is usually accompanied by relaxed shoulders, steady eye contact, and an open expression. Arrogance, by contrast, often pairs with facial tension, dismissive body language, or cold detachment. It's not the chin lift alone that conveys meaning, but the entire emotional frame in which it exists. In essence, a lifted chin is a visual declaration of inner stance. It can reveal strength and self-possession, or, just as easily, pride and emotional distance. Like many body language cues, it's a gesture that walks a thin line between positive and negative impression, depending entirely on how, and why, it's used. Feet point toward exit. When someone's feet point toward the exit, whether subtly angled or overtly turned away, it often signals a desire to leave the situation. This unconscious body language cue reveals more about a person's true intentions or emotional state than their words might suggest. While the upper body may remain engaged in conversation, smiling, nodding, or speaking, the feet often betray the mind's quiet urge to escape, disengage, or move on. Feet are among the most honest parts of the body in nonverbal communication because they're typically the least consciously controlled. Unlike facial expressions or hand gestures, which people can intentionally manage or mask, foot positioning tends to reflect a person's natural instinct. When someone feels uncomfortable, bored, anxious, or simply ready to be somewhere else, their feet will begin to orient toward a psychological exit, a doorway, hallway, elevator, or even just the direction opposite of the speaker. This posture isn't necessarily rude or aggressive. Rather, it's a subtle expression of mental detachment. A person may still be participating in the interaction out of politeness or obligation, but their body, specifically their lower half, is preparing for departure. It's an early warning sign of waning interest or fading attention, and a cue that the person may soon try to end the interaction. The gesture is even more revealing in group settings. If someone's feet are consistently pointed toward another person in the group, it can indicate attraction or interest. But if the feet are aimed at the exit, it usually reflects a desire to leave the group dynamic altogether. This orientation can often go unnoticed in casual conversation but is quickly picked up by perceptive observers. Context, of course, is essential. If someone's feet are pointed toward the exit simply because of how a room is arranged or how they're seated, it may mean nothing. But when this gesture appears alongside other signs, such as glancing at a watch or door, fidgeting, reduced eye contact, or short, clipped speech, it strongly suggests the person wants to disengage. In summary, feet pointing toward the exit is a body language signal that typically indicates a wish to leave the conversation or environment. It reflects internal disinterest or discomfort that the person may not verbalize but expresses physically. Understanding this cue can help in reading social dynamics, recognizing when someone is feeling restless, and adjusting the situation to either re-engage them or respectfully give them a way out. Jiggling foot. A jiggling foot is a classic and often unconscious display of anxious energy, nervousness, or restlessness. This seemingly small movement, rapid, repetitive shaking or bouncing of the foot, can reveal a great deal about a person's internal emotional state, even when their upper body appears calm or composed. In many cases, it's one of the first physical signs that someone is feeling unsettled or overwhelmed. This behavior stems from the body's natural response to stress or mental agitation. When the brain perceives uncertainty, pressure, or discomfort, it triggers physiological arousal, raising the heart rate, increasing muscle tension, and generating excess energy. For some people, that excess energy manifests in visible movements like foot jiggling. It's a nonverbal release valve for internal tension, helping the person self-soothe or manage the discomfort they may not want, or be able, to express out loud. Jiggling the foot can also signal impatience or frustration, especially when it's paired with other cues like glancing at a clock, shifting in a seat, or sighing. In these situations, the foot movement reflects a desire for something to end or move along, whether it's a long meeting, an uncomfortable conversation, or a delayed outcome. It becomes a kind of physical countdown, a repetitive motion that subconsciously mirrors the person's urge for change or escape. Interestingly, the gesture is rarely deliberate. Most people aren't aware they're doing it, which makes it a particularly honest form of body language. Because it often occurs below the line of sight, especially when someone is seated, it may go unnoticed by others, but not always. In professional or social settings, excessive foot jiggling can sometimes be distracting and may even convey a lack of focus or composure, even when that's not the person's intention. Context is key, of course. In casual settings, jiggling a foot might simply be a habit or a way to stay alert. But when combined with facial tension, clenched hands, or other signs of stress, it usually points to underlying nervous energy or emotional unease. In summary, a jiggling foot is a common and revealing body language cue that typically signals anxiety, restlessness, or impatience. It's an unconscious physical outlet for excess emotional energy, offering insight into how a person is feeling internally, even when they try to mask it on the surface. Lip compression. Lip compression, pressing the lips tightly together into a thin line, is a subtle but revealing body language signal often associated with anxiety, hesitation, or emotional restraint. Unlike more dramatic facial expressions, lip compression tends to occur in fleeting, instinctive moments, making it a powerful indicator of what someone may be feeling beneath the surface, even when their words say otherwise. When a person compresses their lips, it often reflects an internal struggle. They might be holding back something they want to say, suppressing an emotional response, or dealing with an uncomfortable thought. The gesture acts as a form of self-censorship, both physically and symbolically sealing the mouth shut. It suggests that the person is trying to maintain control over their emotions, their words, or the situation itself. This behavior is common in moments of hesitation, when someone is uncertain about how to proceed, unsure of what to reveal, or conflicted about what they are thinking or feeling. Psychologically, this action is linked to the body's stress response. In tense situations, even if the tension is mild or internal, the nervous system often activates small muscle contractions as a way of channeling excess emotional energy. Lip compression is one such channel. It provides a tiny outlet for that internal discomfort. People under pressure may compress their lips for just a second or two before speaking, especially if they're about to deliver difficult news, make a confession, or confront a delicate topic. In those moments, the gesture can signal the mental effort it takes to manage emotional or social risk. In conversations, lip compression is also a cue to pause and observe. When someone suddenly presses their lips together after being asked a question, it may indicate that they're uncomfortable with the topic or that they're uncertain how much to share. It doesn't necessarily mean they're lying, but it may mean they're carefully editing their response, or they're experiencing internal friction. If accompanied by downward glances, shifting posture, or a tightening of the jaw, the cue becomes even more telling. Importantly, lip compression can also serve as a silent protest. In situations where a person disagrees with what's being said but doesn't feel free to speak up, due to social dynamics, fear of conflict, or emotional restraint, the lips may press together as a substitute for voicing dissent. In this sense, it becomes a nonverbal act of withholding, not just words but possibly emotion or opinion. In summary, lip compression is a small gesture that often speaks volumes. It can reflect anxiety, hesitation, self-restraint, or the suppression of unspoken thoughts. While easily overlooked, it's one of those fleeting facial signals that offers a window into someone's inner state, revealing, if only for a moment, the quiet tension behind a composed exterior. The confidence walk. The way a person walks is one of the most visible and immediate expressions of their inner state. A confident walk doesn't just reflect self-assurance, it projects it. It sends a signal to everyone around that the person is grounded, purposeful, and in control of themselves and their environment. The confidence walk is not about arrogance or drawing attention, but about moving through the world with quiet authority and presence. A confident walk begins with posture. The spine is straight but relaxed, shoulders are back without being rigid, and the head is held up, eyes forward. This upright alignment creates a natural sense of lift and openness, making the person appear more energized and alert. They are not weighed down by uncertainty or distracted by internal tension, their body moves as one cohesive unit, balanced and steady. Pacing plays an essential role. A confident walk has a measured rhythm, not rushed, not sluggish, but deliberate. Each step is placed with intention, suggesting that the person knows where they're going and has no need to hurry to prove it. Even in crowded or high-pressure environments, a confident walker seems unshaken, moving as if time and space bend slightly to their rhythm. Arm movement complements the stride. The arms swing naturally at the sides, with a loose but coordinated motion. Clenched fists, excessive stiffness, or overly exaggerated arm swings can disrupt the signal. In a confident walk, the entire body moves in harmony, exuding effortlessness. There's no hiding, no hunching, fidgeting, or shrinking into oneself. The person takes up space comfortably, as if to say, I belong here. Psychologically, walking with confidence can create a feedback loop. Just as confident thoughts lead to confident movement, the act of walking confidently can reinforce a stronger self-image. It activates parts of the brain associated with positive emotion and control. This is why many athletes, performers, or leaders walk into their state of readiness, using movement to summon the mindset they need. The confidence walk also influences how others respond. People who walk with poise are often perceived as more competent, charismatic, and trustworthy. In social or professional settings, first impressions form quickly, and posture in motion speaks louder than any introduction. In the end, the confidence walk is not about performance, it's about alignment. When your body, breath, and focus move together with purpose, you're not just walking, you're owning your presence. And that presence is often felt before a word is even spoken. Covering the mouth. Covering the mouth is one of the most ancient and instinctive body language gestures, often signaling an attempt to suppress something, whether it be words, emotion, or truth. When someone brings their hand to their mouth while speaking or listening, it frequently indicates that they are trying to hide a reaction or protect themselves from revealing too much. It is a self-soothing and self-censoring gesture rooted in psychological and even evolutionary behaviors, closely associated with deception, discomfort, or surprise. At its core, this gesture functions as a nonverbal barrier between the self and the outside world. When people feel the impulse to lie, withhold information, or react in a way they don't want others to see, such as laughing, gasping, or grimacing, they may instinctively place their hand over their mouth. It's an unconscious attempt to hold back or contain what is happening internally. In this sense, the gesture operates as a physical manifestation of psychological restraint. When used during speech, mouth covering can be a red flag for dishonesty or internal conflict. A person telling a lie may cover their mouth in the middle of a sentence, either briefly or repeatedly, as if to trap the untruth they've just released. This does not mean that everyone who covers their mouth is lying, but in the context of verbal inconsistency, defensiveness, or nervousness, the gesture can be a strong clue. It often emerges in childhood. Children will literally cover their mouths after saying something they weren't supposed to, and this behavior can persist into adulthood in a more subtle form. When used while listening rather than speaking, covering the mouth can indicate a suppressed emotional reaction. The listener may be shocked, amused, or disapproving, but unwilling to show it openly. By covering their mouth, they try to mute the involuntary expression that might escape, a smirk, a laugh, or a gasp. This is especially common in formal or emotionally tense environments, where social norms discourage overt responses. In such cases, the gesture serves as a kind of self-imposed filter between emotion and expression. It's important to note that mouth covering can vary in intensity and meaning depending on how it is done. A full hand over the mouth may signal serious restraint or shock, while a light touch to the lips or fingers resting near the mouth might suggest milder hesitation or doubt. These subtleties, when combined with other body language cues, such as avoiding eye contact, shifting posture, or blinking rapidly, can help clarify what a person may be feeling or hiding. In summary, covering the mouth is a classic tell of emotional concealment. Whether someone is hiding a lie, stifling a reaction, or censoring their words, the gesture often reveals what the person is trying not to express. It is a protective instinct, small, fleeting, but remarkably revealing for those who know how to read it. Excessive blinking. Excessive blinking is a subtle yet telling form of nonverbal communication that often signals underlying emotional tension, typically stress, anxiety, or, in some cases, deception. Unlike regular blinking, which serves the physiological purpose of lubricating and protecting the eyes, excessive blinking occurs more rapidly or erratically than usual, often in response to internal psychological discomfort. This behavior is controlled in part by the autonomic nervous system and can be difficult to consciously suppress, making it a useful clue in reading someone's emotional state. When a person is stressed or anxious, the body activates its fight or flight response. This causes a cascade of physiological changes: heart rate accelerates, breathing quickens, and muscle tension increases. One of the subtler outcomes is a disruption of normal blinking patterns. Under stress, the brain becomes hyperalert, and the eyes, being closely tied to the nervous system, reflect this arousal through more frequent blinking. It's the body's unconscious attempt to manage heightened internal pressure. In the context of deception, excessive blinking may occur because lying typically demands more cognitive effort than telling the truth. A person must fabricate information, suppress the real story, monitor the listener's reaction, and manage their own emotional response, all at the same time. This mental strain often leaks out through physical cues like throat clearing, fidgeting, or an increased blink rate. The more complex or emotionally loaded the lie, the more likely these cues become noticeable. However, excessive blinking should never be taken as standalone proof of dishonesty. Blink rate can also increase due to environmental factors such as dry air, eye irritation, bright lighting, or fatigue. Furthermore, people with certain personality traits, such as those who are highly introverted or socially anxious, may blink more when they feel scrutinized or nervous, even when they are telling the truth. What makes this body language trick powerful is its subtlety. While most people are attuned to obvious signs of discomfort, they rarely track eye behavior with the same level of awareness. Yet the eyes, often referred to as the windows to the soul, tend to reflect hidden truths more honestly than words can. So, when someone begins to blink rapidly during a moment of questioning, confrontation, or decision-making, it may be worth paying closer attention, not to accuse, but to understand that something beneath the surface is creating pressure they're struggling to conceal. Head tilt. The head tilt is a subtle yet highly expressive gesture that can convey a range of emotions and intentions, most commonly signaling interest, attentiveness, or submissiveness. When someone tilts their head to one side, exposing the neck and shifting the angle of their gaze, they often appear more open, approachable, and emotionally engaged. This movement may seem minor, but its psychological and evolutionary significance runs deep. In moments of genuine interest, a head tilt can indicate that a person is actively listening or thoughtfully processing what is being said. It shows engagement that goes beyond words. Rather than staring blankly, the tilted head signals curiosity or empathy, often accompanied by soft facial expressions and sustained eye contact. This nonverbal cue tends to appear when people want to connect on a more emotional level or demonstrate that they are mentally present in the conversation. The gesture is also associated with vulnerability and trust. When someone tilts their head, they typically expose the side of their neck, one of the most delicate and unprotected areas of the body. From an evolutionary standpoint, this gesture can be interpreted as a signal of non-aggression. It's a way of saying, "I'm not a threat," which makes it especially common in social dynamics that involve deference, submission, or a desire to appease. In this context, head tilting may reflect a willingness to yield control or show emotional softness. This is why the head tilt is often observed in romantic or nurturing interactions. For example, a person flirting might tilt their head while smiling, combining interest with a touch of playfulness and vulnerability. Similarly, someone trying to soothe a distressed friend might tilt their head while offering comforting words, visually communicating warmth and compassion. In power dynamics, the head tilt can also convey hierarchy. A person in a subordinate position, such as an employee speaking with a superior, may unconsciously tilt their head more often, especially if they're trying to appear respectful or agreeable. Conversely, individuals in dominant roles typically hold their heads more upright, maintaining a neutral or downward gaze that signals authority and emotional control. However, the meaning of the head tilt can shift with context and accompanying body language. A slow tilt paired with a furrowed brow or narrowed eyes might indicate skepticism or confusion rather than engagement. In such cases, the gesture becomes less about emotional openness and more about mental evaluation. In summary, the head tilt is a rich and nuanced body language signal that often reveals interest, emotional openness, or a subtle act of social submission. Whether used consciously or unconsciously, it softens the speaker's presence, invites connection, and often says, "I'm listening," or "I'm with you," even when no words are spoken at all. Brief touch to establish connection. A brief, well-timed touch can be one of the most powerful tools for building trust, warmth, and emotional resonance in human interaction. Whether it's a light tap on the arm, a gentle pat on the back, or a quick touch on the shoulder, this small gesture carries a significant psychological weight. It communicates empathy, reassurance, and presence, often more effectively than words. Touch is the first sense we develop as infants, and it remains a fundamental part of how we connect with others throughout life. When used appropriately, a brief touch can trigger the release of oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, which promotes feelings of trust and emotional closeness. This explains why even a fleeting physical connection can deepen rapport or diffuse tension during conversation. The key to this technique lies in subtlety and context. A brief touch during a moment of agreement, shared laughter, or comfort can enhance emotional alignment. It signals attentiveness and sincerity, reinforcing the message, "I'm here with you. I see you." In professional settings, a quick handshake or a congratulatory touch on the arm can project confidence and support without overstepping boundaries. In more personal settings, touch can serve as a gentle bridge between words and feelings. Importantly, the effectiveness of this gesture depends on timing, cultural norms, and the existing level of familiarity between people. An unwanted or mistimed touch can create discomfort or even backfire, so sensitivity to cues, both verbal and nonverbal, is essential. The touch should be brief, respectful, and naturally integrated into the flow of the interaction, not forced or excessive. Those who master this form of nonverbal communication understand that human connection isn't built solely through dialogue, but through subtle affirmations of presence. A brief touch, when authentic, doesn't interrupt the conversation, it deepens it. It reassures, grounds, and momentarily bridges the physical and emotional space between people. In a world often dominated by screens and distance, the power of a gentle touch reminds us that connection is not just something we speak, it's something we feel. Dilated pupils. Dilated pupils are one of the most subtle yet powerful indicators of human emotion, especially when it comes to attraction or heightened interest. Unlike more obvious body language cues, like smiling or leaning in, pupil dilation is largely involuntary. It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which means people typically have no conscious control over it. When someone is emotionally or mentally stimulated, particularly by something or someone they find appealing, the brain sends a signal to the eyes to widen the pupils. This biological response is rooted in our evolutionary past. In the context of attraction, pupil dilation serves as a nonverbal cue that someone is experiencing arousal or emotional engagement. When we look at something or someone we find visually or emotionally rewarding, our brain interprets it as a pleasurable experience. As a result, the sympathetic nervous system is activated, leading to the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine, which in turn cause the pupils to expand. This widening of the pupils allows more light to enter the eyes, sharpening visual focus and symbolically reflecting a desire to take in more of the person or object of interest. What's especially interesting is that people unconsciously respond to dilated pupils in others. Numerous psychological experiments have shown that individuals tend to rate faces with enlarged pupils as more attractive or approachable, even when they don't consciously notice the difference. This creates a silent feedback loop. If your pupils dilate when you see someone attractive, and their brain registers your dilation as a sign of interest, they may unconsciously feel more drawn to you in return. However, it's important to note that pupil dilation can also occur for reasons unrelated to attraction, such as changes in lighting, drug use, fear, or cognitive effort. That's why context is crucial. In a dim room, everyone's pupils will dilate to adjust to the lack of light, but in a well-lit space during a face-to-face conversation, sudden or sustained dilation, especially paired with other signs like open body posture, leaning in, or mirroring, can be a strong indicator of romantic or intellectual interest. In short, dilated pupils are like the eye's unintentional confessions. They can speak volumes without a single word, silently revealing attraction, curiosity, or deep focus, and doing so in a way the person may not even realize themselves. Eye contact too long. Eye contact is one of the most powerful forms of nonverbal communication. It can express connection, confidence, curiosity, or, when held too long, it can cross into the territory of dominance or aggression. While brief eye contact often signals interest or attentiveness, prolonged eye contact, especially when it lacks warmth, can feel invasive, confrontational, or even threatening. The human brain is finely tuned to interpret the subtle balance in gaze behavior, and when that balance is disrupted, it can trigger deep psychological reactions. Holding eye contact for too long activates an instinctive alertness in the viewer, often interpreted as a potential challenge. From an evolutionary standpoint, direct and unbroken eye contact has long been a signal of threat in the animal kingdom. Among many species, including humans, a fixed stare is used to intimidate or assert control. In human interaction, this same behavior can function as a nonverbal declaration of superiority, used either consciously or unconsciously to establish dominance. The longer the gaze, the greater the perceived social pressure, especially if there's no accompanying smile or gesture to soften it. In confrontational settings, such as during arguments, interrogations, or power struggles, people who wish to assert authority may use prolonged eye contact to disarm or psychologically overpower others. It sends a message of emotional control, as if saying, "I'm watching you, and I'm not backing down." In such contexts, long eye contact isn't about connection but about holding ground, intimidating, or challenging the other person's status. Even outside of conflict, excessive eye contact can be uncomfortable. In everyday conversation, there's a natural rhythm to how people look at each other. They make eye contact, glance away, then reconnect. This back and forth creates social ease. But when someone breaks that rhythm and locks eyes for too long, it can feel unnatural and unsettling. People on the receiving end may instinctively avert their gaze, feel exposed, or experience a spike in anxiety. In social psychology, this is often referred to as the staring effect, a feeling that one is being scrutinized or judged. However, it's important to interpret this behavior in context. In some cultures, extended eye contact is a sign of respect and attentiveness, while in others it can be seen as rude or aggressive. Similarly, personality plays a role. Confident individuals may maintain longer eye contact without any hostile intent, while socially dominant individuals may use it as a deliberate tool to assert control. In summary, when eye contact becomes too long or intense, it often shifts from connection to control. It can signal unspoken power dynamics, reveal an intention to dominate, or even serve as a nonverbal challenge. While the eyes may be windows to the soul, they can also be weapons of subtle psychological influence, and how long someone is willing to look can say just as much as what they're trying to see. Eyeglasses removal. The act of removing eyeglasses during a conversation may seem like a minor, almost incidental movement, but it often carries deeper psychological significance. More than a physical adjustment, it frequently serves as a mental pause, a moment of internal recalibration where the individual is processing information, shifting emotional gears, or preparing to make a considered point. When someone takes off their glasses, especially in the midst of dialogue or decision-making, it can signal that their attention is moving inward. It's a transitional gesture, a break from the external flow of the conversation to reorient their thoughts. This may occur in moments of contemplation, disagreement, emotional impact, or cognitive overload. Much like pausing speech or leaning back in a chair, removing eyeglasses is a subtle way of creating space to think. This gesture also functions as a form of nonverbal punctuation. Just as a speaker might pause before delivering an important statement, the removal of glasses can signal that what comes next is meaningful. In some cases, it precedes a shift in tone, from listening to responding, from casual to serious, from uncertain to decisive. The gesture slows down the rhythm of the interaction and invites others to pay closer attention. Eyeglasses themselves are symbolic of focus and observation. They are literal lenses through which one sees the world. Removing them can unconsciously represent a shift in perception, stepping back from a situation, reconsidering one's view, or momentarily withdrawing from a role, e.g., expert, authority figure, listener. It's not uncommon for people to remove their glasses when they feel emotional, challenged, or exhausted, as if breaking the visual link to the external world helps them process what's happening internally. The nature of the movement matters. A slow, deliberate removal paired with a long silence might suggest deep thought or emotional restraint. A quick, irritated motion could signal frustration or disbelief. In contrast, someone who polishes their lenses while thinking is often signaling not just pause, but an effort to clarify, both literally and metaphorically. For observers, recognizing this cue can be valuable. It suggests that the person may be at a turning point in their thinking or emotional state. Rather than rushing to fill the silence or respond immediately, giving them space during this moment often leads to more thoughtful and honest exchanges. In essence, eyeglasses removal is rarely just about comfort or habit. It's a physical manifestation of an inner pause, a moment of detachment, processing, or transition. In the quiet choreography of body language, it signals that something unseen is shifting, and that what follows may carry greater weight. Fast nodding. Fast nodding is a body language cue that often signals impatience, restlessness, or a desire to move the conversation along. Unlike the slow, deliberate nod, which communicates encouragement and attentiveness, fast nodding can subtly, or not so subtly, convey a sense of urgency or irritation. It typically occurs when a listener feels that the speaker is taking too long, repeating themselves, or straying off topic. At its core, fast nodding is a nonverbal way of saying, "I get it already," or "Can we move on?" The repeated, rapid up and down motion of the head reflects inner tension or a lack of mental presence. It's a physiological expression of someone who is mentally ahead of the conversation, no longer fully engaged in listening but instead focused on when they can interject, wrap things up, or steer the discussion in a different direction. This gesture often emerges in situations where time is limited or the speaker is unaware that they're losing their audience's attention. In professional settings, like meetings, presentations, or interviews, fast nodding from a listener can be a warning sign that the speaker needs to adjust their pace or tighten their message. Left unaddressed, it may lead to miscommunication, frustration, or a breakdown in rapport. It's also worth noting that fast nodding can be involuntary. People may not even realize they're doing it. Still, its effect is noticeable. It can make the speaker feel rushed, dismissed, or unappreciated, especially if they interpret the nodding as pressure to wrap things up quickly. In some contexts, fast nodding can be interpreted more neutrally, as enthusiasm or eagerness, but this depends heavily on accompanying facial expressions. When paired with a warm smile and direct eye contact, it may reflect excitement or agreement. However, if accompanied by tight lips, darting eyes, or a tense posture, it's much more likely to indicate impatience or frustration. In summary, fast nodding is often a nonverbal signal that a listener's patience is thinning. It's a cue that the speaker may be losing their audience, and it can subtly shift the emotional tone of an interaction from open and collaborative to strained or pressured. Being able to read, and regulate, this body language gesture is key to maintaining effective, respectful communication. Feet reveal true intentions. While most people focus on facial expressions or hand gestures when reading body language, the feet often tell a more honest story. Unlike the face, which we learn to consciously control, the positioning and direction of the feet tend to be unconscious, making them one of the most reliable indicators of true feelings, intentions, and comfort levels. The phrase, "the feet reveal the truth," exists for a reason. In social interactions, where someone's feet are pointing can indicate where their attention or interest truly lies. For example, if you're speaking with someone who appears engaged, smiling, nodding, maintaining eye contact, but their feet are pointed toward the door or angled away from you, there's a good chance their mind is already elsewhere. Their body is subtly preparing for departure, even if their words are polite. On the other hand, when someone's feet are pointed directly at you, it signals genuine interest and psychological alignment. Foot behavior also betrays nervousness or discomfort. Rapid foot tapping, shifting weight from foot to foot, or turning one foot out while keeping the rest of the body still can all suggest unease or impatience. These signals are often involuntary, people may not even realize they're doing them, yet they speak volumes about how they're really feeling. In group settings, foot orientation can reveal social dynamics. If two people in a group are interested in each other, they'll often angle their feet toward one another, even if they're speaking to someone else. This can signal attraction, alliance, or preference. Likewise, someone trying to leave a conversation will often subtly shift their feet first, long before they make any verbal move to exit. The reliability of foot cues comes from how deeply ingrained they are in our evolutionary biology. In threatening or uncomfortable situations, our primitive brain prepares for fight or flight, often beginning with small shifts in stance, feet adjusting to pivot, flee, or brace. These movements still show up in modern interactions, even in non-dangerous contexts like a business meeting or casual chat. Understanding the language of the feet offers a powerful advantage in communication. It allows you to notice when someone is disengaging before they say so, or to identify unspoken interest or discomfort. It also helps in adjusting your own body language. By aligning your feet consciously toward others, you can signal openness, confidence, and attentiveness, even before you speak. Ultimately, while the eyes may be the window to the soul, the feet are the compass of intention. Quiet and often overlooked, they point not just to where someone stands, but where they truly want to go. Hands on hips. The gesture of placing hands on the hips is a classic and highly visible form of body language that can convey a strong sense of readiness, assertiveness, or, in some cases, aggression. This stance, often referred to as the arms akimbo position, creates a broad, open silhouette that signals physical and psychological presence. It is a posture that draws attention and establishes spatial authority, making it a common instinctual display in both confident and confrontational situations. At its most neutral or positive, hands on hips indicates readiness. Athletes often strike this pose before action, teachers while giving instructions, or professionals during moments of decision-making. In these contexts, the gesture communicates alertness and engagement. It shows that the person is mentally and physically prepared to respond, take charge, or handle what comes next. The posture naturally expands the upper body, conveying energy, stability, and control. However, this same gesture can also signal aggression or challenge, depending on context and body tension. When hands are planted firmly on the hips with elbows angled sharply outward, the person appears to take up more space, often a subconscious attempt to assert dominance or confront a perceived threat. This becomes even more pronounced when paired with a forward lean, narrowed eyes, or a rigid jaw. In such cases, hands on hips becomes a silent warning, "Don't push me," or "I'm ready to fight for this." This dual nature makes the gesture nuanced. On one hand, it can express confidence and proactive intention, on the other, it can escalate tension or serve as a power display. The difference lies in accompanying cues, tone of voice, facial expression, and posture. A relaxed stance with a calm face likely indicates control and confidence. A tense body with flared nostrils or a glare suggests confrontation. Culturally, the gesture also carries implications. In some social settings, it may be seen as bold or commanding; in others, it might be interpreted as disrespectful or overbearing. Gender dynamics can further influence how this posture is perceived, with interpretation sometimes shaped by social expectations around assertiveness. In summary, placing hands on the hips is a powerful body language gesture that can signify either readiness to act or a challenge to authority, depending on the emotional tone and situational context. It projects strength, control, and a strong presence, making it one of the most commanding stances in nonverbal communication. Looking down and to the right. When someone looks down and to the right during a conversation, it often signals that they are engaged in internal dialogue, essentially, talking to themselves in their mind. This subtle eye movement can be a glimpse into the person's private thought process, suggesting they are reflecting, evaluating, or silently rehearsing words. It's a moment where attention turns inward, away from external stimuli, and toward an inner voice or internal narrative. This behavior is commonly linked to theories in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which suggest that certain eye movements correspond to different modes of thinking. According to these models, looking down and to the right, from the viewer's perspective, is associated with accessing internal auditory dialogue, the kind of silent thinking we do when weighing options, rationalizing a decision, or silently reacting to a statement. While the scientific support for NLP-specific eye-accessing cues is mixed, the general idea that eyes reflect inner mental states holds psychological validity. From a body language standpoint, looking down and to the right is not typically associated with deception or discomfort. Instead, it often indicates that someone is temporarily withdrawing into their own mental space. They may be processing what was just said, figuring out how to respond, or recalling a conversation or phrase. In emotionally charged conversations, it might signal self-regulation, a person thinking carefully about their words before speaking. In quieter moments, it may simply be a sign that they are deeply introspective. Interestingly, this eye movement tends to occur during moments of contemplation or hesitation. For instance, if you ask someone a question that requires self-assessment, like, "What do you think about that decision you made?" their eyes may drop down and to the right as they engage their inner monologue. It's as though their gaze follows the path of their thoughts as they momentarily exit the external world to navigate their inner landscape. However, interpretation always requires context. Cultural differences, individual habits, and even handedness can affect eye movement patterns. Some people may look down and to the right out of shyness, fatigue, or simply as a habitual gesture. That said, when this cue appears alongside thoughtful pauses, minimal external engagement, and other signs of reflection, it's a strong indicator that the person is immersed in silent internal dialogue, a quiet moment where the mind takes the lead, and the eyes simply follow. Raised eyebrows. Raised eyebrows are one of the most instantly recognizable and universally understood facial expressions. As a body language signal, they often convey surprise, interest, curiosity, or a heightened state of alertness. This subtle yet expressive gesture involves the lifting of the eyebrows, which opens the eyes wider and can dramatically change the emotional tone of a face. Because it's both reflexive and expressive, eyebrow raising functions as an honest signal of mental and emotional engagement. When someone experiences surprise, whether from unexpected news, a sudden sound, or an unforeseen event, their eyebrows instinctively shoot upward. This reaction is rooted in our evolutionary biology. Raising the eyebrows widens the eyes, allowing more light and visual information to enter, which enhances our ability to assess the environment. In this context, raised eyebrows are part of the body's rapid response system, preparing us to react quickly to the unknown. Beyond surprise, raised eyebrows are also closely linked to interest and engagement. When a person is curious or intrigued, they may lift their eyebrows slightly and maintain them in that elevated position while focusing their gaze. This micro-expression acts as a nonverbal way of saying, "I'm paying attention," or "tell me more." It often accompanies attentive listening, leaning forward, and open posture. In conversation, someone who raises their eyebrows at a certain moment is likely reacting to something they find novel, meaningful, or emotionally resonant. The intensity and duration of the eyebrow raise can subtly shift its meaning. A quick, high arch followed by a return to normal is more often associated with sudden surprise or even disbelief. A softer, sustained lift is more indicative of interest or polite social engagement, such as when someone greets another person or listens closely to what is being said. In many cultures, a quick eyebrow flash, a rapid raising and lowering, is even used as a friendly acknowledgement, often replacing or enhancing a spoken hello. However, context is everything. Raised eyebrows can also be used sarcastically or skeptically, especially when one eyebrow is lifted while the other remains neutral. This eyebrow cock can signal doubt, challenge, or ironic amusement. It shows that raised eyebrows don't always mean open interest. Sometimes they can express incredulity or even subtle judgment. In short, raised eyebrows are a flexible and potent form of nonverbal communication. Whether they signal surprise, interest, curiosity, or skepticism, they serve as a visual spotlight, drawing attention to emotional reactions that might otherwise go unspoken. As with all body language cues, their true meaning becomes clearest when observed in context and alongside other facial and bodily signals, but as a standalone gesture, they often provide a vivid window into what someone is thinking or feeling in the moment. Raised shoulders. Raised shoulders are a subtle but telling body language signal that often indicates fear, anxiety, or submission. When someone instinctively lifts their shoulders toward their ears, especially if combined with a lowered head or hunched posture, they are engaging in a nonverbal gesture rooted in self-protection. It's an unconscious attempt to shield the vulnerable areas of the body, particularly the neck and throat, which evolution has hardwired us to guard when we feel threatened. This posture mimics the way animals might shrink or make themselves appear smaller in the face of danger or dominance. In humans, it communicates a desire to retreat or withdraw without physically leaving a situation. The raised shoulders act almost like an internal flinch, an embodied way of saying, "Don't hurt me," or "I'm not a threat." It's commonly observed in people who feel overwhelmed, cornered, or unsure, especially during moments of confrontation, criticism, or high stress. Raised shoulders can also indicate submission in power dynamics. When someone feels intimidated by another person, be it a superior at work, a dominant personality in a group, or a perceived aggressor, they may adopt this gesture to non-verbally yield. It is not necessarily a sign of agreement, but of deference, a quiet physical cue that the person does not wish to challenge or escalate the situation. In more subtle forms, this gesture can appear during social anxiety or insecurity, even in relatively safe environments. For example, a student who's unsure of their answer might raise their shoulders slightly while responding, or someone uncomfortable in a group setting might hunch their shoulders to take up less space. In these cases, the raised shoulders communicate discomfort and vulnerability, rather than outright fear. However, as with all body language, context is crucial. A quick shoulder raise paired with a confused expression might signal uncertainty or a nonverbal, "I don't know." But sustained shoulder elevation, particularly when paired with tense muscles, shallow breathing, or averted eyes, is a clearer indicator of unease or submission. In summary, raised shoulders are a protective, shrinking gesture that reflects internal discomfort, most often fear, nervousness, or a desire to avoid conflict. This instinctive movement offers a window into a person's emotional state, signaling that they feel exposed or subordinate, even when words might suggest otherwise. Rubbing the neck as a soothing gesture. Rubbing the neck is one of the most telling self-soothing gestures in the language of body movement. Often unconscious, this action typically appears during moments of stress, discomfort, uncertainty, or emotional vulnerability. Whether it's a person massaging the back of their neck with their hand, gently rubbing the side beneath the ear, or briefly touching the nape, the gesture is a nonverbal attempt to ease inner tension, both physical and emotional. The neck is a sensitive and vulnerable part of the body. It houses major nerves, arteries, and muscle groups that react strongly to stress. When someone feels anxious or insecure, the muscles in this area can tighten, sometimes without conscious awareness. Rubbing or stroking the neck becomes a way to physically respond to this tightening, a self-regulatory action meant to calm the nervous system and signal comfort to oneself. Psychologically, this gesture acts much like a security blanket. It's a form of what experts call pacifying behavior, a small, self-directed movement that temporarily soothes internal discomfort. People may rub their necks when they're being questioned, when they feel exposed, when they're uncertain of what to say next, or when they sense that they've made a mistake. It doesn't necessarily mean the person is lying or hiding something, but it does suggest a spike in emotional stress or cognitive strain. The way someone rubs their neck can offer subtle clues. A slow, firm massage at the back of the neck often suggests frustration or internal pressure. A quick stroke under the chin or near the collarbone might signal nervousness or social discomfort. Some may even momentarily grasp the back of the neck, a gesture often linked with feelings of being overwhelmed or emotionally burdened. In conversation, noticing this gesture can be revealing. It may indicate that the other person is uncomfortable with the topic, uncertain about their stance, or feeling defensive despite their words. Rather than confronting it directly, a perceptive communicator might respond with empathy, slowing down, softening their tone, or offering reassurance, thus reducing the internal tension that caused the gesture in the first place. Ultimately, rubbing the neck is not just a meaningless fidget. It's the body's subtle cry for relief, a momentary act of emotional self-care. For those who know how to read it, this small movement reveals more than hesitation or doubt, it unveils the deeper emotional state beneath the surface, offering a quiet invitation to respond with patience, awareness, and compassion. Slow nodding. Slow nodding is a subtle yet powerful form of nonverbal communication that typically signals encouragement, attentiveness, and a willingness to let the speaker continue. This gesture, characterized by gently tilting the head up and down at a measured pace, can create a sense of safety and validation within a conversation. It shows that the listener is not only paying attention, but also open to hearing more. In contrast to quick or impatient nodding, which can sometimes come across as rushed or dismissive, slow nodding has a calming, affirming quality. It conveys patience. When someone nods slowly, they are offering a nonverbal cue that says, "I'm listening," or more specifically, "Go on, I'm with you." This small act can be especially powerful in emotionally charged conversations, sensitive discussions, or storytelling, where the speaker may be gauging whether it's safe or worthwhile to continue. Psychologically, people tend to seek signs of affirmation as they speak, visual indicators that their words are landing, being absorbed, and appreciated. A slow nod satisfies that need, creating a subtle feedback loop of trust and openness. This is why skilled communicators, therapists, interviewers, and negotiators often use this technique deliberately. It puts the speaker at ease and encourages fuller expression, often resulting in more depth, detail, and honesty in conversation. Moreover, slow nodding can shift the dynamic of a conversation in a positive direction. It can soften difficult moments, bridge gaps of misunderstanding, or guide someone who's hesitant toward greater openness. Because it signals empathy and non-judgment, it helps establish rapport without saying a word. In summary, slow nodding functions as a nonverbal green light in conversation. It tells the speaker that their message is welcome and that the listener is fully engaged. Used thoughtfully, this simple gesture can deepen connection, promote better dialogue, and foster trust in virtually any interpersonal exchange. Squared shoulders. Squared shoulders are a classic and unmistakable sign of readiness, confidence, and self-assurance in body language. When someone pulls their shoulders back, aligns them evenly, and holds them firm, rather than letting them slouch or hunch, it sends a powerful nonverbal message: "I'm prepared, I'm present, and I'm in control." This posture subtly communicates physical and psychological alignment. The chest is lifted, the spine is straight, and the body takes up more space, which conveys a sense of alertness and strength. In many social and professional contexts, squared shoulders are associated with competence and authority. They are often seen in military stances, athletic pre-game postures, and confident public speakers, all moments when an individual must project presence and inner stability. From a psychological standpoint, squaring the shoulders can create a feedback loop. Adopting this posture doesn't just reflect confidence, it can actually generate it. Standing or sitting with squared shoulders naturally opens up the chest and facilitates deeper breathing, which can calm the nervous system and enhance focus. This makes the gesture not only expressive but also functional, preparing the body and mind for action, challenge, or confrontation. In interpersonal dynamics, someone with squared shoulders often appears more trustworthy, decisive, and assertive. This posture signals that the person is not hiding, shrinking, or withdrawing. Instead, they are fully engaged, ready to participate, defend a position, or take initiative. It's the opposite of closed-off body language, which typically involves slouching, crossed arms, or turning the body away. However, context still matters. Squared shoulders paired with clenched fists, narrowed eyes, or a rigid jaw can suggest tension or aggression rather than calm confidence. On the other hand, when accompanied by relaxed facial expressions and open gestures, it enhances a person's approachability while still projecting strength. In essence, squared shoulders are a physical marker of psychological readiness. Whether used consciously or unconsciously, this body language cue signals that a person is standing their ground, balanced, composed, and prepared to act. Standing with feet apart. Standing with feet apart is a powerful nonverbal gesture that typically communicates confidence, stability, and readiness. This stance, where a person plants their feet shoulder-width apart or slightly wider, creates a solid, grounded posture that signals physical balance and psychological assurance. It's a classic example of how body language can project inner strength and control without the need for words. When someone stands with their feet apart, they are claiming space, a primal, instinctive way of signaling dominance or presence. In both social and professional settings, this stance conveys that the person is comfortable in their environment, unafraid to be seen, and in command of their physical territory. It contrasts sharply with more closed or uncertain postures, like feet close together, crossed legs, or inward-pointing toes, all of which can suggest insecurity or hesitation. This body language cue is often seen in leadership roles, during public speaking, or in situations where someone must project authority. Think of a speaker confidently addressing a crowd, a manager asserting a decision, or a negotiator standing their ground. Each is likely to adopt this posture. The broad, stable base reflects not just physical steadiness, but also a mental and emotional readiness to engage, assert, or defend a position. There's also a subtle psychological component. Standing with feet apart enhances feelings of personal power. Research in nonverbal communication suggests that adopting open, expansive poses like this one can influence a person's internal state, making them feel more confident and in control, even if they weren't initially. This is sometimes referred to as the power pose effect, where the body shapes the mind just as much as the mind shapes the body. Of course, context and balance matter. A confident stance should still appear natural and relaxed, not exaggerated or aggressive. When the feet are too far apart or combined with stiff, overly dominant gestures, like hands on hips with flared elbows, the pose can come off as confrontational rather than poised. In summary, standing with feet apart is a body language signal that reflects confidence, authority, and a strong sense of presence. It demonstrates that the individual feels secure, assertive, and prepared, making it a key nonverbal tool for conveying leadership, credibility, and control in both casual and high-stakes interactions. The pause and look. The pause and look is a deceptively simple yet psychologically potent body language technique that enhances presence, influence, and communication clarity. At its core, this gesture involves pausing just before or after delivering a key point, and holding eye contact with the other person or audience. It's a moment of deliberate stillness that speaks volumes, even in silence. When used effectively, the pause serves to create anticipation. It gives weight to what's about to be said, signaling that the speaker is thoughtful and intentional. The added element of a steady look, especially direct but non-aggressive eye contact, invites engagement, heightens attention, and subtly commands respect. The brain, wired to notice changes in rhythm and silence, instinctively tunes in when a speaker pauses. Coupled with the look, it creates a tension that draws the listener closer. This technique is frequently used by great orators, leaders, and negotiators. A pause before a statement builds suspense, making the message feel more deliberate and powerful. A pause after a statement allows the message to sink in, giving it emotional and intellectual weight. The look, meanwhile, reinforces the personal nature of the communication. It conveys confidence, presence, and sometimes even challenge, depending on the context. Psychologically, the pause and look communicates self-assurance. It shows that the speaker is comfortable with silence, unafraid of being watched, and confident enough not to rush. In contrast, people who are nervous or uncertain often fill space with unnecessary words, fidgeting, or avoiding eye contact. A pause, especially one accompanied by a calm and intentional gaze, sends the opposite signal: I'm in control. I know this matters. And I know you're listening. There's also an interpersonal dimension. The look isn't about domination, it's about connection. When used with warmth and presence, it can make a listener feel seen and acknowledged. In a one-on-one conversation, it reinforces sincerity and invites honest dialogue. In a group setting, it can make each individual feel personally addressed, even in a crowd. However, like any powerful tool, the pause and look must be used judiciously. Overuse can create discomfort or seem theatrical. But in the right moments, when delivering a key idea, asking a meaningful question, or allowing space for reaction, it can turn a simple interaction into a moment of lasting impact. It's a reminder that sometimes, silence and stillness speak the loudest. Tightened eyes. The human face is a rich canvas of emotion, and few areas reveal as much as the eyes. One particularly telling microbehavior is the tightening of the muscles around the eyes. When someone narrows or tightens their eyes, not simply squinting in bright light, but drawing the skin around them inward, it often signals a moment of discomfort, suspicion, or psychological tension. This subtle contraction is the body's instinctive reaction to perceived threat, confusion, or mistrust, and it often occurs before a person consciously registers how they feel. Tightened eyes are most noticeable in the slight furrowing of the brows, a narrowing of the eyelids, and the appearance of tension lines at the corners of the eyes. It's a controlled, guarded expression, a kind of emotional squint that attempts to reduce vulnerability or gather more information before responding. It typically emerges when someone hears something they don't fully believe, trust, or accept, even if they remain verbally polite or composed. From an evolutionary standpoint, this reaction makes sense. In situations of uncertainty or potential danger, animals narrow their eyes to sharpen focus, block out distractions, and more carefully assess their environment. Humans do the same. When we tighten our eyes, we're filtering input, scrutinizing what we're seeing or hearing, and trying to determine whether it's safe or credible. It's a sign that the mind is shifting into an evaluative, and often defensive, mode. Discomfort, too, is closely linked to this gesture. Emotional unease, whether caused by anxiety, guilt, or an awkward topic, often manifests in the eye region. When someone is forced to listen to something they'd rather not hear, or when they feel psychologically cornered, their eyes may tighten reflexively as they brace internally for what's coming. This tension may be accompanied by a pursed mouth, a slight head tilt, or a stillness in posture, all of which reinforce the signal of guardedness. In interpersonal communication, recognizing this cue is vital. If someone's eyes tighten while you speak, it may be a sign that your message has triggered skepticism, discomfort, or hidden disagreement. Rather than ignoring it, a skilled communicator might pause, clarify, or soften their approach. That moment of tension is often a gateway to deeper truth. Something is not sitting right, and the eyes are speaking it before the mouth does. It's important to note that tightened eyes don't always mean hostility. Sometimes they reflect concentration or uncertainty rather than suspicion. The context, facial expression, and body posture all matter in interpretation. But when seen during emotional or sensitive moments, this small tightening is often the first visible sign that someone is internally stepping back, raising their guard, or preparing to question what's in front of them. In essence, tightened eyes are the body's quiet defense mechanism, a blinkless shield behind which the mind gathers caution. They are the visible edge of discomfort or doubt, reminding us that not all resistance is spoken aloud. To notice them is to catch a glimpse of the unspoken struggle for trust and understanding. Touching objects. Touching or fidgeting with objects, whether it's a pen, a phone, a piece of jewelry, clothing, or even a coffee cup, is a subtle but telling form of body language often associated with anxiety, nervous energy, or emotional discomfort. This behavior acts as a nonverbal outlet, a way for the body to self-soothe or release internal tension without drawing overt attention to the underlying feelings. When someone is anxious or uncertain, their nervous system becomes activated, often resulting in physical restlessness. Touching objects serves as a displacement activity, redirecting that nervous energy into small, repetitive motions that offer a momentary sense of control or comfort. These behaviors are rarely conscious. A person might twirl their hair, tap a ring, adjust their glasses, or shuffle papers without realizing that they are expressing internal unease. The type of object and the way it's touched can provide additional context. For instance, nervously clicking a pen or drumming fingers may suggest impatience or agitation, while gently rubbing a piece of fabric or clasping a personal item can imply a need for reassurance. These small actions create a physical anchor, a point of focus, that helps ground the individual in a moment of emotional disruption or mental overload. In social settings, especially during interviews, first meetings, or confrontational discussions, this behavior often appears when someone feels exposed, judged, or uncertain about how they're being perceived. Rather than expressing their discomfort verbally, they communicate it non-verbally by interacting with their surroundings. While these gestures may seem insignificant, they can reveal deep-seated emotions or a lack of inner ease. Importantly, these movements are not always negative. In some cases, they serve a regulatory function, helping the person maintain composure or concentrate under stress. However, excessive or compulsive object touching can distract others or signal a lack of confidence, especially in high-stakes environments where self-assurance is critical. In summary, touching objects during conversation or while under pressure is a common nonverbal expression of anxiety or stress. It serves as a coping mechanism, a way to release tension, regain a sense of control, or shield oneself from emotional discomfort. While often subtle, these gestures provide valuable insight into a person's emotional state, especially when words don't tell the full story.